McDonald's pizza. Only Lee's for Living Carpet comes with a first-ever 25-year no-exclusion stain warranty.
And it's only available at Viviano Carpet One. When it comes to flooring, nobody does it better than Viviano Carpet One.
At www.and.com.
Today's A&E classroom may be taped solely for instructional use and may be retained until April 30th, 2000. Thereafter, you must erase or destroy the recording. No other use is authorized by A&E.
High in the Andes Mountains of Chile, up where the ancient peaks have never felt a human footstep, is a mystery of the ages. To even search for an answer means working against monumental odds, hoping a single rock will reveal the tiniest clue to what happened here millions of years ago. Just getting to the clues means crossing glacier streams, scaling slick stone walls and waterfalls, looking for fossils. These are the clues that will give them a window into the past, to envision a world much different from today. To do it, we'll have to fly to places known only to condors, where the view goes back 32 million years, back to when these mountains were born. Hello, I'm Bill Curtis. In the heart of the Andes Mountains of Chile, behind me, a peak full of glaciers melting into the valley below. It's hard to imagine the moment when these mountains were formed. We used to think it was a function of plate tectonics, where two plates collided and in a single thrust formed the Andes chain. But recent discoveries indicate that it was far more complicated than that, and almost as surprising as how we learned about it, through tiny clues in the rocks, like this fossil of an ancient mammal embedded in an unassuming stone. To the untrained eye, it's almost invisible. But in the eyes of an international team of geologists gathered for a new explorers expedition, the rock comes alive. And some of their discoveries lead us to a whole new understanding of what happened here. It's not easy being a scientist. The first test is to make it across the river. This hasn't changed from the time of old explorers, always more exciting because of the quest. Searching for answers which could dramatically change our understanding of how these mountains were formed. John Flynn is a paleontologist from the Field Museum in Chicago. He'd been working in the Andes for 4 years when he made a startling find.
In paleontology, you often hope you make a discovery like this where you're the first one in and no one's ever visited it before, because there are skulls and skeletons and jaws just lying over the surface.
They were unusual fossils, which teased scientists about a new history of these mountains. But to fully understand their significance, John Flynn needs to find more. So he assembled an international team of geologists, paleontologists, and naturalists to search these slopes. Rinaldo Chirrier, a geologist at the University of Chile, and his son Andy, his field assistant. Bill Simpson, a paleontologist from the Field Museum, and Gabriel Carrasco, a Chilean naturalist with a knack for finding fossils. They hope to find enough evidence to create a new model of how and when the Andes were formed. The mystery began high above the vacation village of Termas del Flaco. Tourists come here to enjoy the natural thermal baths. But the scientists were drawn by something else.
It's the right environments to preserve fossils, so it should have the right kinds of rocks. And we knew that there were some dinosaur footprints from this valley. So you had three things that were kind of coming together to indicate it could be a good place to look at least.
And these dinosaur footprints are easy to find.
Now those are amazing footprints.
The incredible footprints of a 150-million-year-old dinosaur.
As far as I know, this is the only one that produces the prints.
They're the tracks of an iguanodon, a huge plant-eating dinosaur that roamed this area at the very end of the Jurassic period.
The thing about footprints is this is evidence of a living animal. It's really thrilling. You know, this isn't bones from a dead animal. This is the living dinosaur walking across the mud. Just transports you back into the Jurassic. It's wonderful. These are big footprints to fill.
They are. Footprints of time 150 million years ago.
Incredible to think about.
When you remember Reynaldo and the people are talking about the dinosaurs walking up the hill, and then being able to explain that it's just that these were flat and then they've been uplifted by the geologic history.
Unless we believe a dinosaur could walk straight up a mountain wall, we can almost see it trekking along in mud on flat land. And then over 150 million years, the Earth moved into this wall. Based on these prints and other findings in similar rock layers, scientists had concluded that the sediment in this entire region had been formed between 90 and 150 million years ago, during the age of these great reptiles. So when John Flynn and his team first came searching for dinosaur fossils, they expected to confirm that theory.
We only had a day to do a very, very rapid prospect reconnaissance, and so we had two of us go up this valley and two go across to the other valley.
As they were climbing down after a fruitless search, one of the team members slipped and fell on top of some unusual bones.
They had big teeth, they had enamel, they looked like mammals, but they looked like advanced ones, much younger than these rocks were supposed to be.
Some of the bones were as small as dinosaurs are big, and from animals no one had ever seen before. They knew it could be the find of a lifetime. At the Field Museum in Chicago, under careful examination, fossils found in an area that was supposed to be 100 million years old were dated at 32 million years, an astonishing discovery. They were fossils of ancient mammals, animals that didn't exist 100 million years ago. This new date meant the entire geologic history of this area had to be rethought. The first step, to find more fossils in an extended area to further date these layers of stone. If they could find enough fossil evidence to prove these new, younger dates extend through the whole region, they'll be on their way to creating a whole new model for the birth of these mountains. Their research centers on Chile, a narrow nation squeezed between the Andes and the Pacific, bordered on the west by more than 2,700 miles of ocean. Chile is never more than 225 miles wide. The Andes stretch the length of its long eastern border. For this new expedition, I'll join Flynn's team and make sure the going is much easier. We'll use some new Explorer tools to dance around the peaks. Our destination is right at the top of this great range that runs like a spine down the length of South America. With this new lift into the sky, the scientists can finally look in places where no one could even climb before. Places so remote, there are waterfalls that have never been seen, peaks that have never been scaled, and regions that were simply too forbidding to reach. It will take a combination of luck and skill. But if we can find the fossils, it could dramatically advance our understanding of how the Earth works beneath our feet.
We've targeted 3 areas. All 3 of these areas have the appropriate rock unit that we're interested in.
The key to a successful expedition is finding the right spot to look for fossils.
If that doesn't pan out, then we've got 2 other targets we can move to tomorrow by flying to these areas from there, which is the nice reason of having the helicopters with us.
To create a new geologic model, the team must map an entire section of this mountain range.
This valley is interesting because it sits between 2 major valleys where we found really important fossils, and so we have an expectation that we'll be able to find additional localities in this new valley, so we're hoping we can fill in the gap in between them.
That's the mission, made possible by helicopters. And it's quite a trip. We're headed to an unexplored area. Flying out of urban Santiago, the nation's capital, we pass over the vineyards where Chile's popular wines are produced. And quickly into the mountains that are Chile's soul. The midsummer sun melts the ice at all but the highest elevations, creating twinkling cascades of fresh water. From the air, I can see the sharp angles, the multicolored layers, evidence of the violent collision of tectonic plates far below. The Andes were formed by the collision of the oceanic plate of the Pacific and the continental plate of South America. As the dense ocean plate is driven below the continent, land is forced upward, forming mountains. As the oceanic plate edges closer to the molten core of the Earth, the crust melts. The heat and energy are released through volcanoes. While we know this basic model of plate tectonics, the best way to learn how and when these plates were moving and how these mountains were formed is to carefully examine their sediment for clues. This magnificent land has long been a laboratory for the world's scientists. Charles Darwin even visited on the famous voyage of the HMS Beagle. That's spectacular. I mean,
This is
it's
really
purple
dramatic.
and white. It's just...
This is what we're looking for, is this kind of banded coloration. Now, they look great, and we won't know until we get up on there whether there's anything in them, but at least we've got the right kinds of rock.
The history of these mountains is buried in its layers. Hopefully our few days on these slopes will be enough time to find the treasures hidden here. So, what's the plan? Where are we going?
Well, what we'll do is work our way up the quebradas, the small gullies, and try to get to where we can get to the fresh surfaces of the rock. So your eyes are always scanning the surface, looking for any glint of bone, certain texture, certain color.
Even here?
Even here. Doesn't look like the place to find fossils, but you'll sometimes find them scattered on the surface.
Wind and weather force rocks down from the high cliffs, offering traces of what may be buried in the inaccessible slopes above.
So this looks like a big wash.
That's what it is.
You know, for your purposes, it may have taken the fossils out and just tumbled them down.
That's right. So all you can do in this is to get a sense of whether there might be fossils that are tough enough to be preserved. and would still be in place in the rock higher up.
To understand why the fossils found in these layers are so much younger than scientists expected, they need to carefully chart the layers of this entire region. Starting with finding fossils to quickly date these sediments.
Yeah, these blocks look pretty good. It's got just the right appearance.
What is it?
It's a volcaniclastic, which means it's the debris that sits on the edges of volcanoes, ashes and things that come blurping out. Then they sit there for a long time until they get saturated with water, and then they come sweeping across the surface, tumbling all this stuff down, and they'll often sweep fossils up in there. But one of the things about these volcanic-derived things is that they happen so quickly that they seem to bury things almost pristinely. You can get skulls and skeletons, complete animals, and that's not very common.
As the pressure within a volcano intensifies, ice and debris on its slopes are heated and come sweeping down. The remains of animals are trapped in these giant mud flows. Over millions of years, these bones are preserved in the solidifying sediment. Before Flynn and his team made their finds, many scientists believed there would be no animal remains in these sediments, that the heat of the volcano would have burned all the remains in its path. But these new explorers have found just the opposite, that these mudslides happen so quickly they preserve the bones, often intact, leaving a treasure trove for paleontologists.
And it's very interesting because I imagine that we must have had vast, wide plains, actually sinking areas, more or less like the Rift Valley in Africa, and that in these valleys, the mud flows coming from the volcanoes transported and killed all the living beings that were in those places. And that's why these deposits are so rich in fossil material.
Since they've never been to this part of the Soufrière River Valley, they'll try to get as much information as they can in a very short time. We fan out, trying to cover as much ground as possible. It doesn't take long for John to find the first clue.
What kind of bones?
They're mammal bones, and they're sections, as we often find in these things.
Well, I didn't know what we were looking for.
Right.
It's so tiny, I was going to pick that out. But isn't that
often the bone will weather to this whitish color on the brown rock, but you can tell it's different in tone and texture to everything surrounding it on here.
And with the glass, it actually looks like bone.
Yeah, often we'll have to check it to make sure that it really is bone and not some kind of altered mineral. So this is definitely bone.
So what does that say?
Well, it says there are fossils in here.
Wow.
And the fact that we have bone here already is an important discovery.
A tiny fragment of bone. It's not much, but it tells us there's more here to be found. It's been a successful day of field work.
Well, here's a coast to another beautiful place in the mountains in Chile and some good fossil localities.
Here. Good job.
Find some more tomorrow.
The cool Andean night finds us tired but satisfied. We found hints of ancient life here. Daylight will bring the search for more. We'll take the full moon as a good omen. Mornings are never easy. Breakfast is a simple affair. We're making cowboy coffee, a specialty of the house.
You can then use this to seal cracks.
It's our specimen glue.
Yeah, wouldn't it?
Okay, who needs coffee? Roberto?
Well, don't everybody rush. You know, you can chew this coffee.
See?
A little energy for the long road ahead.
And we targeted this area because you can see the layers.
John and Reynaldo target areas that look promising, taking advantage of the chopper to reach the highest layers quickly. It's the only way to get to the sheer cliffs where important finds may be buried. Soaring above the peaks, we have a bird's eye view of millions of years of geologic history. And it's spectacular. It's a dangerous game. Pilot Roberto must watch for wind currents that can change direction and force with little warning. We're headed into a very narrow ravine. Landing in here is like threading a needle. Roberto must find a ledge, flat and wide enough to land on and be able to lift off.
I thought he was going to go down there in the wide
place
spot.
up there, he said, and I couldn't imagine this was the place. But anyway...
Oh, right in the middle of it here?
Yeah.
We'll be moving gradually up this canyon, searching for fossils. In the field, geologists and paleontologists use the types of animals they find to roughly date the rocks they're found in. These animals are the first clues to the age of these ancient stones. It's harder than I expected, climbing up and at the same time trying not to slip. Half the trick is getting there. What looked easy from the air is treacherous on these walls.
No place to cross here?
Or maybe cross there where Gabriel is?
Even at 6,000 feet, it's over 90 degrees in the sun.
Better than a lot of hotels I've been in.
But we endure the heat and steep slopes, hoping to find what paleontologist Bill Simpson did at the end of another long, hot day.
We've cracked thousands of concretions in these valleys around here with these 2-pound crack hammers. And most of the time, there's nothing in them. Every now and then, though, you get really lucky. This is one I found in 1993. This is a complete lower jaw of a notoungulate, complete dental battery. Every tooth is in the mouth. There's basically nothing missing here at all, and it almost needs no lab work. The way it split was a very lucky split, and the surface is completely exposed. So that's kind of the best-case scenario, and that's what keeps us going, looking for something like this. You've uncovered another little key to the past.
And inside these keys to the past is information about both the geologic history and the ancient ecology of this region.
And the other interesting thing is how tiny these are and how much, however, they can tell you about the Andes around us.
Well, the significance really isn't related to the size, and often the smallest things are the most important to fill out the picture, because you'll find tiny marsupials or tiny rodents, and they give you a fuller picture of the ecosystem at the time.
The fossils John and his team have found fill in a 15 million year gap in the evolutionary history of South American mammals, from 30 to 45 million years ago. These are unfamiliar creatures. Extinct groups like notoungulates, or southern hoof plant eaters, giant glyptodonts like armadillos, mammals that didn't survive the last 32 million years.
And it's important because it fits in a gap in the fossil record of South American mammal evolution, and so it helps us understand what was happening during a time when we had no fossil record before.
And these animals tell us more about where these mammals came from, how they evolved, to adapt to a changing environment and what that environment was. By starting to fill this 15 million year gap in the record of South American mammals, Flynn and his team have been able to trace the development of these animals further back than ever before. The team's most spectacular fossil find was made on the other side of this valley.
We found the monkey skull in 94 from a large rock that fell from the mountain. I always look at all the rocks, underneath, on top, and one part looks strange, like the top part of the skull. A large block of rocks were taken to the United States to be cleaned. In time, the teeth began to appear, and they realized that it was a monkey skull, the most complete that has been found in South America.
What Gabriel had found was a previously unknown species of monkey, a species now named Chelicebus carrascoensis, after its discoverer, Gabriel Carrasco. The rock bearing the monkey skull was dated at 20 million years old, making it the oldest, most complete monkey skull found in South America.
There's been a debate about where they came from, when they got here, what the ancestral monkey forms look like. And this specimen is providing a very important window on understanding that.
It's an invaluable find that links South American monkeys to those from Africa, leading to the conclusion that these monkeys somehow rafted across the Atlantic on loosened chunks of land to spread into the Americas. This skull has pushed the evolutionary envelope for South American monkeys back another several million years. Every fossil has the same tantalizing potential. It's what lures John Flynn and his scientific team to these Andean peaks.
These look perfect. I know, it's a beautiful ethology. Now let's keep looking.
But for now, the jaws and teeth here remain hidden. Not far from our expedition is Santiago, Chile, the nation's capital. It's a modern center of commerce and culture with a population of more than 6 million. Strolling its sidewalks, Santiago feels like a European city. But just a few hours' drive and you've entered a rugged land, an untamed frontier of cowboys and the restless ponies they're trying to tame. The people of Chile have always lived with violent upheaval of the earth. Active volcanoes are the price they pay for living on the edge of a continental plate. Here in the central Andes, the team is exploring this vast swath of mountain, an area formed by the mud and debris that swept down the volcanoes in this region tens of millions of years ago. As the structural geologist of the scientific team, Reynaldo Chirrier's work is to determine what sort of geologic event formed the layers of stone we see today.
It's a volcanic material here, kinds of ashes that have been deposited by rivers in this place.
He can tell the history of these sediments by their makeup. A fine gray material may indicate volcanic ash from an ancient eruption. And that's just what Reynaldo finds. Ash. The characteristics and depth of these layers tell him volcanoes were erupting here for millions of years. Eruptions that may have looked something like this. The largest volcanic landslide in recorded history, unleashed by the eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state. On May 18, 1980, the 50,000-year-old volcano exploded with the force of several atomic bombs. The debris avalanche released by the destruction of the volcano's north flank raced at speeds of up to 682 miles per hour, killing 57 people and devastating more than 150 square miles of forest. and from the bones of the thousands of deer, elk, and birds killed, in several million years, there may be new fossils, leaving traces of life on the edge of this cone at the moment it erupted. Mount St. Helens is part of the Cascades mountain range. Like the Andes, it sits on the active edge of a continental plate, where the Pacific plate is subducted under the North American continent. Seattle, Washington is an urban center located near another of the Cascade volcanoes, Mount Rainier. There is more snow and ice perched on the unstable flanks of Mount Rainier than on all the other Cascade mountains combined. The mountainside is so unstable that part of the slope could slide off at the slightest event, carrying heavy sheets of ice with it. This combination would create an instant wet debris flow that could devastate surrounding towns without warning. Seismologists have monitored thousands of small earthquakes under Rainier in the last 45 years. Some fear that even a relatively small seismic event could be enough to send an enormous mud flow as far as Seattle, 55 miles away. Scientists know that it's happened before, when the Puget Sound was an unpopulated coastal area. Today, a major mud flow would be catastrophic, as it was for the residents of Armero, Colombia. In 1985, the Nevado del Ruiz volcano erupted. A powerful current of water-saturated mud and debris flowed at speeds of up to 25 miles per hour straight into the valley, completely enveloping Armero and killing more than 20,000 people. There's no way to prevent these devastating landslides. It would be like trying to halt the forces of the earth itself. But with better understanding of their causes and consequences, we may be able to prevent them from taking such an enormous human toll in the future. The landslides at Mount St. Helens and Armero are modern versions of what was happening in Chile millions of years ago. These mudslides are often caused by increased activity in the volcano. As pressure within the volcano mounts, its surface may begin to shift, loosening ice and debris on its flanks. Hot water and gases further destabilize the cone area by melting the ice, creating mud. The combination creates an enormous mudslide that destroys and buries everything in its path. These volcanoes are typically located on the edges of low-lying areas or basins. When the mud flows sweep down the volcano, they are deposited in these basins, forming a layer after each volcanic event. Lava, ash, and other materials form other layers. Here in the central Andes, the many layers of volcanic mud flows and lavas are about 3 miles thick. In comparison, the giant ash flow from Mount St. Helens created a layer just 18 inches thick. Evidence that this region was subject to thousands of these massive eruptions. The fossils have been crucial in dating these rocks because over millions of years, the original composition of the rock layers is altered. Magma from underground can seep into the layers, heating the water present in the sediment. The process changes its chemical makeup, making the rock difficult to date. With fossils, the sediment can be dated by the types of animals trapped inside. Since paleontologists know when different species existed, recognizing the specific set of fossils in a sedimentary layer provides a date for the rock. After millions of years, the volcanic deposits in these basins have turned to stone. When the tectonic plates in this region begin to compress again, it's in these surface basins with their thin, weak layers that the Earth is forced upward. If the compression of these plates was a simple pushing together, the layers should be rather orderly, with the younger layers on top of the older ones. This is the model scientists had used to predict the composition of these peaks. But when John and the team found the younger mammal fossils beneath the older layers, they realized this model was wrong. If fossils 32 million years old could be found in layers believed to be 100 million years old, the whole concept had to be turned on its head. Instead of piling up in a simple, orderly fashion, these layers of stone had been tilted and crunched in ways no one had predicted. Older layers had been forced above younger ones. As the edges of the rocks eroded away, tracing their ages became even more complicated. The twists and turns mean the tectonic plates below must have been moving in a variety of directions and at different speeds, offering a stunning glimpse of the dynamic processes beneath our feet. And all the time, we thought it was a relatively smooth uplift toward the sky.
But it's now clear that that's not the case, that there were disruptions, that there was uplift of the mountains and tilting of the mountains, basins forming, filling in with sediments, and then later on, this whole thing was squished towards the east, and big pieces of it were thrust upwards.
This model may lead to a whole new understanding of how the Earth as we know it came to be.
It's amazing out here. This is very complicated geology. This is not what you would call layer cake. It's a layer cake in which you drop the cake. They are going every which way. The rocks have been thrust, and as they were thrust up, they were folded and broken, heated up, changed through the heat and pressure. This is a mess, and it's a real challenge to try and straighten it all out.
Our new explorers expedition is trying to do just that, searching for fossils to date each layer of this mountainside, a kind of blueprint of how the Earth moved. Unfortunately, today's fossil hunting hasn't turned up much. We head for camp with few bones in our sacks. The copter can get us high into these layers, but only we can find the fossils on foot.
We'll break a few concretions, see if we find anything. Wildflowers are beautiful.
Over the years, John and the team have found hundreds of fossilized jaws, skulls, and skeletons in these slopes. The site of their original finds continues to yield fossils, erosion exposing valuable new specimens every year.
Yeah.
Among their most important finds are these, ancient teeth.
At least 6 or 7 teeth.
Gabriel found this well-preserved jaw earlier in the field season. With just one tooth, a paleontologist can make crucial observations about the animal and about the environment it called home.
The enamel on these guys goes all the way to the bottom of the tooth, on the top and the bottom. Having the enamel all the way is so that you can continue to grind down the surface through life as the tooth continues to grow, so you can eat very tough vegetation like grasses that have a lot of grit in them. And if you had teeth like ours, you'd grind them flat in a couple years, and then you'd gum your food for a while, and then you die. So this is an adaptation to eating grasses.
The teeth tell scientists how the animals had adapted to survive. High-crowned teeth mean the animals lived in a grassland environment.
And 32 million years ago in South America, having grasslands is about 15 to 20 million years before grasslands take over on any other continent in the world. So there's a dramatic environmental change going on here, which may have to do with what was going on with the uplift of the Andes.
Discovering that this area was grassland is a major find with global implications. Why would this area have made the transition from dense forest to open grassland before any other region in the world? We know that it happened relatively quickly. 40 to 50 million-year-old fossils have sharp teeth, adapted for a leafy forest environment. But just 10 million years later, a minute in geologic time, there were 32 million-year-old mammals with high-crowned teeth living in grasslands. Evidence of a major climate shift in a relatively short time. Scientists have long identified the era from 30 to 35 million years ago as a moment when the Earth's climate cooled dramatically. The fossils proved that at this very moment, the Andes were in a period of almost constant volcanic activity and uplift, which could have affected global climate change, the possibility no one had imagined.
That assemblage then is filling in our understanding of not only the animal evolution, but the environmental evolution and how it relates to climate change.
All from tiny fragments of tooth and bone. Our last morning in the Andes. While John and the others make a last effort to find fossils, I can't resist taking advantage of the chopper for a closer look at the magnificent glaciers that tower over the landscape. The view up here is breathtaking, almost unearthly. Resting like crowns on the highest mountaintops, these sheets of ice sit at elevations high and cold enough to keep them frozen, impermeable to the blazing southern sun. Even here, the animals have evolved to survive in this forbidding environment. As we descend, I see the teams in a wash below. I wonder what I've missed.
John, what have you got? What is it?
Skull, Bill. About an inch and a half long. It's really fantastic.
The aspect we saw when Ronaldo found it. And in cross-section, it looks like this.
Breaks right open, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I can see bone.
Yep, and you can see the teeth. These are the cheek teeth and a big gap, what we call diastema, and then those are the nipping teeth up in front. So this is the snout.
Yes.
You can see in this view as well, that's the nasal chamber where it smells, and you can see the internal structure of basically the air passages.
Boy, that's a good one, isn't it?
Yeah. With it, it's going to be wonderful. And this is
A part of a skull, the rare and most important find. It looks like a fossil from the period of dense forests, 40 to 50 million years ago. But we won't know for sure until the fossil is prepared, revealing the tooth structure.
And then what is it on the other side? Does it go through?
It will.
The snout doesn't go through, but the middle of the skull is still represented. So the skull has greater width, of course, as you get back away from the snout.
So basically, it will be complete from the front tip back to around where the eyes are.
Boy.
That is so exciting. We've been hoping for that.
After days scanning the cliffs, a significant find in the wash next to our campsite.
You sit there and you look at a lot of rocks saying they should be in here, they should be in here, and then eventually you find it.
Well, every square foot couldn't have been covered with animals. So you have to take a little disappointment with the big ones, but I can see this is really something.
Great.
What a way to wrap up this dig.
Somehow it always happens at the very end.
Preparation at the Field Museum confirmed what they had hoped. It's the skull of a 40 to 50 million-year-old hooved plant eater, or notoungulate. Just the type of animal the new model predicted. These spectacular fossil finds and the information they hold will keep luring John Flynn, Reynaldo Chirrier, and the rest of the team to these valleys to study these peaks, to search these cliffs for fossils, to learn more about the history of this region and our planet.
You'd like to believe you're making substantive contributions, and I think that's the way science works. You have collaborations, you change pre-existing ideas and make better interpretations, and each time you ratchet up your level of understanding.
The fossils found in this range have added new knowledge to the world's book. Each piece potentially another breakthrough in our understanding of the dynamic relationship between the Earth and the life it sustains.
This is incomparable. It's such an amazing experience to be able to come out and make discoveries and learn something about Earth history and see animals that have been buried for 50 million years that nobody's ever seen before. One of the most beautiful places on Earth. You can't ask for a better combination.
They may seem like small clues, these ancient jaws and teeth. But with them, we've learned more than ever before about the animals that lived here, the environment that sustained them, and the immense force that created these mountains less than 32 million years ago. It's an exceptional new window into the intricate history of our remarkable planet.